All right, so let's dive into some pretty serious allegations against Sean Diddy Combs. We're talking about multiple lawsuits here, including two brand new ones that involve minors. It's heavy stuff, obviously, and we want to make sure we handle it responsibly, you know, by focusing on the facts that are being reported in all these recent news articles.
Yeah, for sure. It's super important to be sensitive with this topic.
Hmm.
But to kind of give everyone a bit of background, Diddy is like a titan in the music industry, a true icon. But these lawsuits paint a very different picture. They allege a pattern of misconduct going back years.
Okay, so let's unpack these new lawsuits a little. One of them involves a man who says Diddy assaulted him way back in 2005. And get this, he was only 10 years old at the time. What can you tell us about this case?
Well, this particular lawsuit is especially disturbing because it alleges that Diddy was very deliberate in his actions. The man, who was like an aspiring young actor and rapper back then, he claims that Diddy insisted on meeting him alone before even meeting his parents.
And that's when the alleged assault happened.
Yes, according to the lawsuit. It claims that after the boy performed for Diddy, someone connected to Diddy gave him a soda that was spiked with something, and then Diddy allegedly forced him into performing oral sex and even threatened the boy and his parents, saying if they ever spoke out about what happened, there would be consequences.
God, that's just horrific. The lawsuit describes how this has affected his entire life,
Huh.
talking about like severe depression, anxiety, and just this overwhelming sense of hopelessness he's carried with him ever since. It's just a powerful reminder of how events like this can really scar someone for life.
Absolutely. If these allegations are true, they highlight the profound and lasting trauma that can result.
Let's talk about that second lawsuit. This one involves a 17-year-old contestant from that show Making the Band back in 2008.
Right. This lawsuit paints a picture of an ongoing pattern of abuse over a 3-day period. The plaintiff alleges that during these private meetings with Diddy and Diddy's bodyguard, he was groped, forced to perform oral sex, and even sodomized.
It's even more disturbing when you consider the power dynamics in this situation. This was a young guy, an aspiring artist, hoping to make it big on Diddy's show. And the lawsuit claims that Diddy used that to his advantage, saying that he could make or break the contestant's career.
Yeah, that alleged manipulation is just deeply troubling. The lawsuit goes on to say that when the contestant expressed discomfort and tried to resist, Diddy eliminated him from the competition, labeling him as untrustworthy.
So both of these new lawsuits allege that Diddy exploited these young aspiring artists. This seems to be a theme that runs through a lot of the previous allegations against him too, right?
Yeah, it definitely seems to be a recurring element. Now, it's really important to be clear here. Diddy's attorneys completely deny all these allegations. They've called them ridiculous and demonstrably false, and they've even accused the plaintiff's lawyer, Tony Busby, of just trying to drum up publicity.
So they seem pretty adamant that Diddy is innocent.
Oh yeah, they issued a statement saying that, quote, Mr. Combs never sexually assaulted or trafficked anyone, man or woman, adult or minor. They're standing by their client.
Wow, sounds like we're in for a very public legal battle. And these new lawsuits, they're just part of a much larger legal situation for Diddy, aren't they?
Exactly right. There are over 24 lawsuits already out there, all alleging sexual misconduct. And on top of that, he's currently facing federal charges.
Wait, federal charges? What are those about?
So he's been charged with sex trafficking, which basically means using force, fraud, or coercion to make someone engage in commercial sex acts. He's also facing charges of racketeering, which is a term that often refers to organized crime, and it involves a pattern of illegal activity. And then there's transportation for prostitution, which is essentially moving someone across state lines for the purpose of prostitution.
Wow, those are some serious charges. And are these charges connected to the individuals involved in these recent lawsuits?
No, the federal charges are separate. The indictment does mention one specific victim, but prosecutors have hinted that there may be more victims out there.
Okay, so how has Diddy responded to these federal charges then?
He's pleaded not guilty to all charges, and he's awaiting trial, which is currently scheduled for May.
So on top of all these lawsuits, he has a federal trial coming up. It seems like Diddy's in some pretty serious legal trouble.
He definitely is. And just to add another layer to this whole thing, it's worth mentioning that Diddy has actually settled one of these civil suits that was filed against him in the past year.
Really? Which one was that?
It involved his former long-term girlfriend, Cassie, who had also accused him of abuse. But the terms of the settlement are confidential, and Diddy's lawyers made it very clear that settling doesn't mean he admitted to any wrongdoing.
Right, and it's important to remember that in both the lawsuits and the federal case, these are just allegations at this point. Diddy is innocent until proven guilty, and we need to let the legal process play out.
Absolutely. However, the sheer number of accusations and the severity of the charges are hard to ignore. They raise some serious questions about Diddy's behavior and the environment within his inner circle.
It's a disturbing situation for sure, and it'll be interesting to see how it all unfolds. We'll definitely continue to follow it closely.
Now, before we dive into the potential impact of all of this on Diddy's career and public image, I think it's important to understand a bit more about the lawyers involved in these cases.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about the legal teams.
All right, so on the plaintiff's side, we have Tony Busby and Andrew Van Arsdale. They're representing the individuals making the accusations. Busby, in particular, has become a familiar name in all this, as he's filed multiple lawsuits against Diddy already.
He's definitely been a vocal advocate for his clients.
He has. He recently held a press conference where he not only detailed the allegations, but also encouraged other potential victims to come forward. His firm even set up a dedicated hotline for anyone with claims against Diddy.
Wow, that's a bold move. It seems like he's really taking an aggressive approach.
He is. And that's drawn some criticism from Diddy's legal team. They've accused Busby of seeking media attention and trying to influence public opinion, rather than just focusing on the legal process itself.
I can see how they might see it that way. It's a strategy that's definitely generating a lot of buzz around the case.
It really is. But regardless of Busby's tactics, the fact remains that these are very serious accusations, with potentially significant consequences for all parties involved.
This is just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it?
It is. We've laid out the basic facts and allegations. But there's a much deeper story here, one that delves into the potential impact on Diddy's career and the complex dynamics of power and accountability in the entertainment industry. We'll explore all of that in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, I'm ready to go deeper. Stay tuned, listeners, because things are about to get really interesting. Welcome back, everyone. So we just spent some time talking about those serious accusations against Diddy, the lawsuits, the federal charges. It's a lot to process for sure. But now I want to kind of shift gears a little and talk about the potential fallout from all of this. Even if Diddy isn't found guilty in court.
Yeah, that's a really important point to bring up. We're living in a time where the court of public opinion can be just as impactful as an actual courtroom. Especially with social media, it just amplifies everything. So these accusations, regardless of the legal outcome, could have a massive effect on Diddy's image and his entire career.
That's true. I mean, think about it. Diddy has built this whole empire on his persona. He's like this charismatic, successful figure, and these allegations really challenge that image.
Right. It's not just about him as a person anymore. We're talking about a whole business empire. Music, fashion, even a tequila company. His success hinges on attracting talent, securing big partnerships, and maintaining a certain level of trust with the public. These allegations, even if they're never proven, they can really damage all of that.
And we're already seeing some cracks. This upcoming trial is generating a ton of negative press, and public opinion definitely seems to be shifting.
It's pretty much unavoidable at this point. Companies that sponsor him might start getting cold feet, worried about being associated with all of this. Other artists that he collaborates with might distance themselves to protect their own reputations.
What about his fan base? Could this affect the loyalty and support he's built up over decades?
It's definitely a possibility. The hashtag #MeToo movement really showed us how quickly public sentiment can change. Consumers are a lot more discerning now about who they support. They're holding public figures to a much higher standard.
So you're saying that even if Diddy wins in court, even if he's acquitted of every single charge, the damage to his reputation might already be done?
It's hard to say for sure. The legal outcome will definitely play a role. But public perception often goes beyond what happens in the courtroom. It's about the whole narrative, the evidence presented, how the media portrays it all.
This whole thing is a high-stakes game for Diddy, legally, and in terms of how the public views him. It'll be interesting to see how he and his team handle this.
Absolutely. This could be a turning point, not just for Diddy's career, but for the whole music industry. It really underscores how allegations of misconduct can impact even the biggest names out there.
Before we go any further, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about Tony Busby, the lawyer representing the plaintiffs. He's taken a pretty unusual approach to these lawsuits, right?
Well, he has. And I think it's worth talking about. Busby's become a key figure in this whole story, and his methods have definitely attracted a lot of attention, some good, some bad.
He hasn't been shy about speaking out, holding press conferences, encouraging other victims to come forward, even setting up that hotline. It seems like his strategy is all about putting pressure on Diddy, even outside the courtroom.
It does, yeah. Some legal analysts have compared his approach to Gloria Allred, the lawyer who's famous for representing clients in those high-profile misconduct cases. Both Busby and Allred have been criticized for being overly aggressive and using the media to potentially sway public opinion.
But I bet some people see him as a champion for these alleged victims, giving them a voice, giving them the courage to step forward,
Yeah,
especially when they're up against someone as powerful as Diddy.
exactly. They see him as someone who's willing to fight for people who might not have the resources or the platform to speak for themselves. He's kind of like a voice for the voiceless.
But there are his critics too, right?
Oh, yeah. They say he's grandstanding, seeking attention, and potentially jeopardizing a fair trial by trying to influence public opinion before the case even gets to court.
So they think he's trying to sway the jury pool.
Right. They argue that cases like this should be decided in the courtroom based on hard evidence and legal arguments, not in the court of public opinion.
It's a tough situation. On the one hand, you want to support the victims and make sure they're heard. But on the other, you have to uphold the idea of a fair trial for everyone involved.
Definitely. It's a real dilemma. And Busby's approach is making everyone think about these complicated questions. It brings up some ethical issues about the role of lawyers in these cases and how they navigate the world of media.
It also reminds us that we live in a totally different world now. Information spreads so fast, and social media can really shape public perception.
It's like there are two trials going on at the same time, one in the courtroom and one in the court of public opinion.
And those two trials can definitely affect each other.
For sure. Public pressure can sometimes lead to settlements, even in cases where the evidence isn't that strong. And on the flip side, a not guilty verdict can still hurt someone's reputation if the public has already decided what they believe.
So it seems like Busby's strategy is to play the long game, use the media to keep the pressure on, and maybe even force a settlement no matter what happens in the actual trial.
That's one way to look at it. He's a smart lawyer, and he knows how to leverage media attention. We'll have to wait and see if his tactics actually work in the end.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into these Diddy lawsuits, it's clear that this is about way more than just a legal battle. It's a story about power, accountability, and the really complex ways that these accusations play out in the public eye.
Absolutely. And it's a story that's far from over. We'll keep following the legal proceedings and see how it all shakes out for Diddy's career and legacy. It'll be interesting to see how this affects the wider conversation about misconduct in the entertainment industry.
In the final part of our deep dive, we're going to explore that even further. We'll look at the bigger picture and what this could all mean for the entertainment industry as a whole. All right, so we're back, and I want to kind of pick up where we left off, talking about Tony Busby, that lawyer who's been right in the thick of things. Representing the plaintiffs in these Diddy lawsuits, he's taken a very, very unique approach. And it's definitely sparked a lot of conversation.
Yeah, no doubt. Busby's practically become as well known as Diddy himself in this whole saga. He's not your typical lawyer, quietly working in the background. He's out there making statements, doing press conferences, really using the media to his advantage.
Yeah, it's like he's running a whole separate campaign alongside the legal proceedings, encouraging more victims to come forward. That hotline he set up, it feels very proactive.
It is. He's not just reacting, He's trying to control the narrative.
Right.
Putting pressure on Diddy from every angle. You could say he's taking a page out of Gloria Allred's playbook. She's another lawyer known for these high-profile cases.
Right.
And she's definitely not afraid of the limelight either.
And like Allred, Busby's approach has been met with both praise and criticism.
Right.
Some people see him as a hero, a champion for the victims, especially those who might feel powerless going up against someone like Diddy.
Exactly. He's seen as someone willing to fight for those who might not have the resources or the voice to speak for themselves.
But then you have the critics.
Oh, for sure.
Saying that he's grandstanding, seeking attention, and maybe even jeopardizing the fairness of the legal process by trying to sway public opinion before the case even makes it to trial.
Yeah, they're worried about him tainting the jury pool, making it harder for Diddy to get a fair hearing.
So they think these cases should be decided purely on the evidence and the legal arguments, not in the court of public opinion.
That's their stance.
It's a tough balance, wanting to support the alleged victims and make sure their stories are heard, but also upholding the principle of a fair trial for everyone involved.
It's a real ethical tightrope walk.
Yeah.
And Busby's really forcing us to confront these difficult questions.
It's a whole different world we live in now, too. Information spreads so quickly, and social media can have such a huge impact.
Yeah, it's almost like there are two trials happening.
Right.
One in the courtroom and one playing out in the public eye.
And they can definitely influence each other.
Absolutely. Sometimes public pressure leads to settlements, even when the evidence might not be that solid.
And sometimes even a not guilty verdict can't fully repair someone's reputation.
Especially if the public has already made up their minds.
So it seems like Busby's playing a long game here, using the media to keep the heat on Diddy, hoping to maybe force a settlement regardless of what happens in court.
It's a smart strategy. He knows how to use the media to his advantage.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into these Diddy lawsuits, the big takeaway is that it's not just about the legal battle. It's about power. It's about accountability. It's about how these kinds of accusations unfold so publicly.
It really highlights the complexities of these situations.
And it's definitely a story that's going to continue to develop.
We'll be keeping a close eye on it.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it informative. And as always, keep asking questions and keep diving deep